I've been faculty at Maharishi University of Management there for the last 5 years, and my role has been research scholar and artist in residence. So I've been working on this series of paintings and also trying to do a deep analysis of their structure in relation to Maharishi's Vedic Science. So this basically covers what my work is about. It's Maharishi Vedic Science angle on things, this knowledge of consciousness that Maharishi's revived for us. And then this is the title of the series, Absolute Image, the Structure of Consciousness in Visual Form. And what we're trying to do, what my discussion finished up being, is like a re-evaluation of our visual world from this point of view of consciousness, because the knowledge that's come out that Maharishi's revived from this Vedic tradition, it's new knowledge. It's ancient knowledge, but it brings out new values of understanding about human life, individual human life, and our relationship with the great big life of the whole universe. So this is Vedic science. It's very profound and very complete knowledge. So I felt that I wanted to know, because there's two things that I found most exciting. One was painting, and the other was this knowledge of Vedic science. I've been working for the movement for many years, doing design work, and then in 1990 I had a chance to come back. I was originally trained as a fine art painter, and that's what my degrees were in, and I had a chance to come back to my own work, and I wanted these somehow to make these two things come together. This knowledge of consciousness and then, my discipline of painting. So basically I wanted to know how these dynamics of consciousness that Maharishi was bringing out, how they operated in my medium. So that's kind of been the discussion I've been having with myself over all these years. And I've pretty much finished writing now. 2 books basically, this one, which is pretty much complete now, and it's a large coffee table book with large reproductions. So it introduces all the main themes of what I'm discussing, and then I've done a much longer book. This is going to be in 3 volumes, where we really go into analysing the relationship between the structure of consciousness and the structure of the visual image. So what I feel has happened for me is that by applying that knowledge of consciousness to my discipline, it's taken us to much deeper levels of its reality and what its potential is. And that's what I'll be trying to present, a little bit of that tonight. Whatever I'll be flowing with the audience here, whatever your interests are. What else should I say? I should say that if any question comes up in anybody's mind, don't think it's not important, because if it comes up here in this group, that means it's important for the whole group. So if any question comes up, don't judge it, just feel free, to just share it when you're ready to do that. Let's see, why don't I start here? Is there anything anybody would like to say about my work, or share any kind of experience, or ask any question? And we can start from there, because probably once I start talking, I might not stop, because I've got 10,000 things I'd like to be discussing with you, and you probably all want to try and get home by Sunday night, if you can. But so there we go. If there's anybody has a question they'd like to ask, or a comment they'd like to make about the paintings. Yes, sir. That's you.
Well, I've told you this before, but to share with the group, for those of you who know, there's an advanced meditation course going on campus called the IA Assembly, and where, I guess I can say, people are encouraged to share their experiences during their practice. And one day someone was sharing his experience and he was having trouble expressing something. And then he said, It's just like a Lawrence Sheaff painting.
That was a very nice confirmation for me. But are there people here, maybe there's people who aren't meditators yet or don't know much about Vedic science, so maybe I'll just do a little refresher thing so we orient all of us together what we're talking about. So I've done this little chart here. I don't know if everybody can see it, but in terms of our modern scientific understanding, which uses this objective approach to gaining knowledge, what's happened is that all the sciences have gone, started with the surface material, physical value of everything, and then come to understand these deeper structures of natural law or nature that lie behind these. I mean, all the sciences have been structured in that way now, hierarchically, from the very abstract levels of nature and natural law to these very concrete expressions that we see, in our manifest universe. So I've just taken here modern science physiology. We've got the extended environment, our outer environment. Then we have our body, the holistic value of our body, and then that's built of this smaller unit, the cells. And for your information, there's 200 trillion cells in the human physiology, and they're all coordinated together, and they're all operating together as one wholeness. So this is nature's creative intelligence, unfathomable. And then subtler level molecules, then the atoms, subatomic particles, and then physics. Then the physics levels have defined these 5 spin types. These are getting more and more abstract, more and more refined levels of natural law, and then the 3 superfields. And now modern science has identified this unified field of all the laws of nature. Now, above here, this is all like material creation above here, but then modern science has now identified that there's another aspect of natural law which is purely abstract, and this is what it calls the unified field. And it's in this field that all these abstract impulses of intelligence, if you like, operate, that organize the whole universe and its ever-expanding structure. All organized from this field of pure intelligence here, which modern science calls the unified field of all the laws of nature, or the unified field of natural law. Now, that's from the modern science point of view. Now, what the Maharishi Vedic Science does, one of the main things it brings out is that this unified field that's the source of everything, it is not separate from us. In modern science, you have the scientist over here and the unified field over there. It's like an objective study of that structure, whatever it is. But this is not a unified vision of life, because the scientist is left out from this big wholeness that he sees. Vedic science comes along and bridges that gap and creates this unified vision of the whole value of life, of the whole value of the universe. Because it says that this unified field is actually a field of consciousness. And through the transcendental meditation technique, we can take our surface level thinking in a very simple, natural way and begin to experience these subtler and subtler levels of the thinking process until we get to the finest impulse of thought, and then we can transcend that finest impulse of thought. That's why we call it transcendental meditation. And then we can be in this field of pure consciousness. Now, as we can see from here, that this field is where all the laws of nature operate. So what happens with this, the whole purpose of this technique of meditation is that you begin to identify yourself more and more with that field of intelligence that's organizing everything. So this is a very simple, natural, innocent process. It just goes on by itself, and the result is that you find your life is, you feel more harmony coming up in life, you feel more creativity coming up in life. And this is the indication that this you're getting more and more in harmony with that field of natural law that's organizing everything, because you find you're getting more support from nature or more support from the environment for the things you want to do and create. So, in a very simple way, we've tried to, paint the background to what we're going to be talking about tonight. Now, what has this got to do with my paintings? Well, I'm hoping you're going to tell me that. But the thing is, I always say, just because you create the painting doesn't mean to say you know what it is. And you find that with most artists, because when they're operating, they go into a very, very quiet, silent state when they're creating, and it's a spontaneous expression that comes out from them. So I think all artists can identify with that. In fact, I think all creative people can, because people who are organizing a business or organizing a family, whatever it is, there's a holistic value that you're kind of connected with, which guides you how to organize the thing. And once you get involved with that area of activity, and you focus on it more and more, then more and more information comes up for you how to organize it properly. So like that. But we find that transcendental meditation is a tool that expands our consciousness, expands our awareness, allows us to appreciate not only ourselves more, but also everybody that we're interacting with more. So the whole of life gets richer and fuller as a result of this simple technique. Is there a question that might come up now about, yes?
While you were talking over here, I was looking at the progression area, and I was thinking, I wonder what occurred for Lawrence as he went through these progressions. Like, was it, I think I met you right when you started creating these.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
And that would have been in '99.
Yeah, I'd started a little bit before that. We first started to come in '95, actually.
And so I wonder,
30 years near the beginning.
Was there something that occurred? Was it just a progression of wanting to express something in yourself that became more subtle, or as you were creating, you felt like, no, this isn't quite it, and this isn't quite it, and then you got to this level?
It is very much like that. Would it be interesting for me to walk through the progression here? Okay, great. So, as I said, I'd started fine art painting originally, and then I was doing this design work for the movement for many years. Anyway, in 1990, it's like I had a chance to come back to do my own work. I was still doing work for the movement, but I had more time, and it was a time for me to actually, come back to my own work. There was a kind of, it was the moment for me to do that. So I had to sort of create a situation where I could do that, in the context of my other responsibilities. So I was able to do that, and I thought now, and then as I said, the idea was how to bring these two things together, this knowledge of consciousness and then my discipline of painting. So I thought, well, it's not going to work for me to try and, intellectually paste Vedic science onto the visual arts. That's not going to work. And then I realized the only thing to do, seeing as I'm being impelled to start painting again, is just to start painting with the intention that I want these two things to come together. I want the process. I realized that the knowledge of consciousness in my medium has to come out of the process of interacting with it. So that was the first clear thought I had. And that served me, actually. That served the purpose, as it turned out. So I just started, and I thought, well, where do the visual arts start traditionally? And it's very simply that thing of looking on the outside and seeing this, full dimensional, three-dimensional world. And then the artist, in the medium of painting, then he translates the sensation of that three-dimensional world onto a flat surface. And he gains all the skills of because there's some particular meaningful arrangement of things that ignites that inspiration in the artist, something special, some special sparkle or life in that thing that he's looking at that makes him feel he wants to recreate that in his medium. So, then you go through the training of how to do that. So I thought, well, let's just start. So I'm doing still lives and some landscapes and things. And what you see here, I made slides of my work as I went, and to record, the progression of it, to see what was happening. The ones you see here, I did many, many, many more paintings than this, many hundreds of paintings. But I just picked out here the ones where I felt there was a transition, a key transition, to help me see how the progression was working, and what perhaps the significance of that was, and whether it was taking me any closer to this, understanding this structure of consciousness in my medium. So here we go. And what are we seeing here? It might be difficult to see from far back because these are quite small, but you can get the feeling. We started out with terrific detail of the textures of the objects and their proportions and their relationships, all those things that you learn to measure and render accurately in the medium. And then gradually, over time, that real detailed experience of the outer objects started to dissolve away, and the images became simpler and simpler, and very simple here, and getting more and more abstract in these things. And then this level, and then this level, there's still some kind of sensation of some kind of still life objects. But when I got to this level, I suddenly had this revelation, and it's terribly simple when you spell it out, but because it came out of the process itself, it was completely transforming for me, because I suddenly realized we can sum up the whole of my discipline in 2 words: color form. In fact, the whole of our visual aesthetic reality, as I call it, can be summed up in 2 words. It's just color form. So this is a great thing. And then the next...
color form?
Color form.
Form.
Yeah. And I write it color-form because then I realized that they're never separate. They're never separate things. Every color has a form, and every form has a color. It doesn't matter if you're imagining it in your mind or if it's some manifest object. For example, we can say this is a pen and it's pink. Now, in our mind, we can intellectually separate those 2 things out. If you want to apply an intellectual view of this thing, we can say, oh yes, there's the form of the pen, and then we can say separately, well, what color is it? Oh yes, it's pink, it's not blue, it's pink. But in terms of the thing itself, it's pink pen, or pen pink. It's always one thing. And this is a principle that applies to every structure in creation. So again, little simple things about the discipline, but nobody had ever told me that. And it was completely I felt I was getting a grasp of the whole thing, starting to understand something about what this discipline of painting was. And the discipline of painting has been hugely influential, I think, in every culture. But I mean, we can particularly see the case in our Western culture, how the political and all the different sociological changes that were taking place. There were always artists who were motivating that, and who were expanding people's vision and understanding. So the arts are a very, very powerful mode of expression. And of course, we've had the sciences coming up more since the Renaissance, and they've also added that intellectual understanding. Now, when we get to this kind of level, it's almost the images, the detail of the things starting to fade away. And then suddenly this symmetrical thing came up. So this was a whole series of paintings I did. But at the back of my mind, for about a month, there was this little painting. Kept popping up in the back of my mind. And I kept saying, I don't know what you are, stay out of the way because this is what I'm supposed to be painting. So anyway, after about a month, it was still there. And I said, okay, then to get rid of you, I'm going to sit down and paint you. It was only a little thing about this thing. Anyway, when I finished this painting, I can still remember the sensation. I was sitting there looking at this thing, and I suddenly realized that all this had gone. All this was finished now for me. Whatever I'd needed to learn from that process was done. And here I was. I mean, I didn't know anything about this stuff coming out. I was sitting with this one little thing here, which I didn't know what it was. And I knew I couldn't go back here because this was redundant to go back there. So it was two things. It was terrifying and it was exhilarating. It was terrifying because I knew that I didn't know what was going to come. I didn't know, there's this abyss in front of me. I had this little painting, there was this great big void in front of me. What to do with it? And then it was exhilarating because I knew that this was a moment where actually nobody else can help me, because I've hit on something that's so personal to me as an artist. Even though I didn't intellectually understand it, I knew that this was something extremely significant. And this little image is built on a grid of squares. And there's three basic forms in that image. One is a single square, and one is a double square here, and then another is three squares locked together, making an L shape. So I worked with just those three variations of form for a whole year. And these are all the images, I mean, there are many, many more I did, but this marks this evolution of this stage. And as you can see, they're getting more and more complex. The structures are getting more and more detailed and complex till we get to this level where you can see that if I went on and on, we'd finish up, with pixels, little pixel values of these things. But looking back, I'll come to that in a moment. Anyway, while we were working here, then this image kept popping up into the mind. And I did the same thing. I kept saying, no, this is what I'm supposed to be painting. But it kept coming. For about 2 months, it kept coming. And I said, okay, we'll do the job here. And again, when I'd painted this, then all of this had gone. The whole thing had gone. And again, I didn't know what this painting was or where it was going to go. It was the same situation as with here, but I knew somehow that this was much closer. This was somehow much closer to this marriage that I wanted between the structure of the understanding the structure of the visual image and this structure of consciousness in Vedic science. So anyway, having painted that, then suddenly all these images of a similar structure were rushing into my mind, and I didn't know quite what to do with them, because I thought, gosh, these are incredibly detailed. I don't even know how to paint them, and if I started painting one, how long will it take me to paint it, and what's going to happen to all these other images that are coming into my mind? So I stopped painting. So I thought, I didn't know what to do. I was kind of stuck. So I waited, about a couple of weeks went by, and I suddenly thought, what if I start making some notations in a sketchbook of these images when they come, and let's see what happens. And then that was a wonderful breakthrough for me, because I found that I just needed to make a few visual and verbal notations of that sensation of that image, that wholeness of the image, in my sketchbooks, and I could come back to that any time, and it would re-enliven the wholeness in my consciousness. You see, when I'm painting, I work from the wholeness of the image. It's the wholeness, colour form of the complete image is there in the mind, and I just take all the instructions from that when I'm painting. When I'm painting, there's no intellectual or philosophical thing going on. Because I found out very quickly that my job is just to see the image and then paint what I'm seeing. Because in the first two or three images, I was trying to figure out how to paint them, and I get to a certain point in the painting, and I think, oh, wouldn't it be great if I did this? And as soon as I interfered with the thing, the painting went dead. Couldn't do anything with it. So I realised Lawrence Sheaff, has to mind his own business. I have a job. It's a simple job. This is my job. I see the thing, and I paint what I see, and I stay out of it. My job and skill, if there's any, is just to oversee that translation of this inner abstract experience into a concrete form. Now I found, of course with practice I began to figure out, how I can paint more and more exactly what it was I was seeing. So after 2 or 3 paintings I got that down, and then of course that went on refining and evolving, but basically it was there. And I found that if I just followed that simple, be very innocent and just paint what it is I'm seeing, and then these layers would unfold, and then this concrete experience of the visual image would come to a completion, and it would be something that would directly resonate with that inner sensation. So then I knew that the painting and I could then agree that the job has been done, and it has a life of its own, and it goes wherever it needs to go. And so that's basically how it works, and that was the experience I had. Did that help?
Totally, thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Lawrence, when you see when these things come to you, do they come to you in color? Because my reaction until now has been in terms of the form and the expansiveness and that experience. But as I was sitting here looking at the paintings and the vibrancy of the colors, how does that happen?
Yeah, the form and the colour, as we said, they're always locked together. So that's how the experience comes. And how it works is, if we want to say a little bit more about the process, is that, okay, I decide I finish this painting and now what's the next one I want to do? It might be one that that came to me yesterday, last evening or something, or it might be something from 7 years ago. I know which is the next painting I have to do. And so what I do is I get the canvas out, I get the paints out, I have the thing in the sketchbook. So the whole thing is like set up, that like nature, as it were, knows I'm going to paint this painting. So as soon as I set that situation up, then I'm sitting there and I say, well, where do I start? And it's then that the details, only then, that the real details of the image start to unfold. Because these paintings are built up in many layers. And that means you've got to get layer 1 and layer 2 right, because when you're on layer 5, there's no way you can go back and change that. So these paintings are too complex for me, anyway, to kind of work out intellectually. So I just work from that wholeness, and I just as it were, surrender, or I just innocently follow that wholeness and whatever the impulses are. Or paint the whole thing green, and now paint it all blue, whatever it tells me to do, and then whatever the impulses are that come up, I just follow that. And, then when you're into the painting, you say, okay, there's a bundle of lines here, and then I'll make a note in my sketchbook. Now, okay, how many lines are there? Oh, there's 10. No, there's 11. And then, okay, what width? Oh, it's that width. And then the spacings are equal, or whatever like that. So then when you get that, and then the painting of them, then how thick should that line be, and what colour should it be? So all those aesthetic decisions are just making reference to the wholeness. It says, oh, you feel, oh, that line's a little too thick, like that. So this is the way we work. So in other words, I can't take any credit for these paintings because it's that inner wholeness itself that actually is organising everything. And I think in talking to people, I think everybody sort of has that experience. When you have quite an important decision to make in your life, for example, and you talk to your different friends and take their advice and everything. But when it comes down to it, what you're going to do, you refer to yourself. You say, no, I feel I should do this. And that's that wholeness. That's the wholeness giving you the information. You've taken you've made lively in your mind the dynamics of the situation. So you've got all the components. But then that crystallizes for you what your particular destiny is in your life. Whether it's a decision for the business, a decision for the family, or if you're some artist or whatever it is you're doing in that field. Then like that, does that kind of make sense to people? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think everybody has had that experience. So this is all we're talking about here. And it's just that for me, because this very simple job I do, which is a little blobs of paint and this white thing we work on, it's very simple. And so that very, very simple structure has allowed me, I think, to experience for myself quite clearly, the actual dynamics of creativity, how it works, how the consciousness works. And this constant interaction between this localized value that you're making a decision about and the bigger wholeness, which is really everything about Vedic science. Vedic science is about that integration of the individual consciousness with this universal consciousness. This is what Vedic science is about. And the point about making this, integrating these two things, is because then our life, as we said, flows spontaneously with natural law. So everybody, every individual in the world has a role to play, and it's absolutely vital to the big wholeness. This is the picture we get from Vedic science, that the individual is potentially cosmic, and there's a constant interaction going on between our localized awareness and this great big consciousness that's organizing everything. There's a constant interaction going on. As our consciousness gets more and more expanded and gets more and more awakened and lively, we become more and more of a conscious participant in that dialogue between the big wholeness, the evolution of the big wholeness, and the evolution of each individual life in the universe. So that becomes more and more lively and more of a conscious experience. So this is life getting richer, more expanded, and the experience gets fuller and fuller. So Vedic science says every human being is designed to live on that level of life. If you're not living on that level of life, then you're sort of subhuman. Human life, the human nervous system, is built to live on that level of life and flow with that enormous bliss of the expanding universe. This is what we're designed to do. And if you go into all the ancient knowledge, whether it's religious or philosophical or anything, there's always reference to that level. They're always, in the end, talking about that level, trying to describe that level of natural law, because that's what it's all about. Now, what's happened is, modern science, as we said so beautifully, just from the intellectual angle, the human intellect is so refined that, they're talking about, this is the Planck scale, 10 to the 33 centimeters. That means 10 with 33 zeros after it of a centimeter. This is the level of refinement of understanding about the structure. And then also the big universe. Our universe is if we take the Earth as a center, and then there's a sphere that we can take the measure off from there, the diameter of that is 27 billion light years. And a light year, the speed of light is, 186,000 miles a second. 186,000 miles a second. So a light year is how far light travels in a year. And then you multiply that by 27 billion. And that's how big our known universe is. And now modern science is saying, this is just one universe. They realize there's an infinity of universes that are adjacent to ours, and it just goes on. So this is the size of nature's intelligence, and the beautiful thing is that intelligence is our intelligence. We have it there, deep in our consciousness. It's all just consciousness. Vedic science says, the modern science says, everything's just a unified field. It's just fluctuations of this pure abstraction. So that's the same as in modern science language. And then in Vedic science language it says, this is a field of pure consciousness. So everything is just abstraction, actually. through our sensory structure, our senses, we can experience all these different qualities, hot and cold and hard and soft and sweet and sour. All these things are the information we get through the set of our five senses. And this is the way we respond to that material manifest creation. But in terms of, in the end, the actual structure itself is just abstract field of consciousness. So this is the unity of life. And the great thing is, as I said, that consciousness is not something separate from us. It is our consciousness, and we're interwoven, all of us are interwoven with that fabric of the universe, and we're all part of its unfolding. And the more we can unfold our own potential creativity, then the bigger our life becomes, the more fulfilling it becomes. Diana, you had a question? Yes.
Anyway, so I assume from everything you're saying, the requisite technical skill unfolds and grows with each painting.
Yeah.
And you may not have had it way back then, but it comes up when needed.
There's no end to that refinement.
Yeah, obviously.
Because the way it works is the image comes, and then it's a challenge to you, because it's suddenly more complex. Yeah. How do I articulate this? So that challenges you to expand your skill of expression. And then when you've done that, when you've gone through that experience, somehow that sharpens your ability to see inside, what's going on inside. So again, then another thing comes up. So like that, there's no end to that refinement. There's no end to that refinement. And the level I think we want to be able to come to is there's no limit. The other thing Vedic science is there's no limit to human creativity. Human creativity is infinite. It's absolutely unbounded, just like the big intelligences. We hear from the past, these ancient cultures, man is made in the image of God. Now, Vedic science does a way of expressing that is saying the individual is cosmic. So individual life is potentially cosmic, like that. But what were you saying about creativity? Oh, you said that refining that thing, yeah. So there's no end to that refining. There's no end to that refining. Oh yeah, except that when we come to the level where, these paintings take a time. As I say, I build them up in layers, so they have their own time that they unfold, and I have to flow. I just have to flow with how that information unfolds for me, and stay focused on the project. I usually just do one painting at a time. But eventually, of course, we can go to the level where we just see the image, and then we just breathe onto the canvas, and the whole thing is there. So this is described in these ancient discourses about art and human creativity. It says that that's the level of creativity that human beings can go to. And we're going to rise to that now at this time, because this knowledge, we're getting, this experience is available. Little children can do this experience, have this experience. It's so simple. So like that, then the whole brain physiology is going to be woken up, and everybody's going to be using their full potential and all that. So it's going to be a completely different world is coming up, folks. And the sooner the better.
Well, one of the things that's so amazing is that in your paintings, there obviously is almost like this infinite amount of creativity that you're tapping into from the wholeness, but there's also this infinite amount of orderliness reflected in the color, orderliness. And I guess for me, technically, having done a little bit of painting, I'm just amazed at how you can rise to that level of perfection with the orderliness. I get the creativity, because I don't really have a problem with that too much, but that orderliness and capturing that, and that just seems amazing to me.
Mm. I just paint them,
Well, like for instance, this green one being on you,
Yes.
all the concentric circles. How do you get the concentric circles so perfect? Are you using string and a point or something?
Oh yeah. No, I should explain. I use some very simple traditional tools. I use a straight edge, which is just a piece of wood, because the lines had to be straight. I had to have these paintings wanted to be as precise as I could make them, and then the circles I use what's called a beam compass. I bought it from the little kids painting department in Walmart. Actually, it was a little unit at one end, and then there was a little dowel, wooden dowel stick, and then this. So at one end there was a thing where you could fix a tool, and the other end was a pointer. So I just bought the unit and extended the stick. So you have a point at one end, and then you can move the holder of your drawing instrument up and down, so you can enlarge and reduce the diameter of the circles. So that's how I figured out to do the circles we were seeing there.
Do you use ink, or is it a watered down paint?
I use different things. Because the colours, we want to be working just with pure flat colours without really any gradation, because we want to be working with the ground state of the medium, because we're calling them absolute image. So we want to use the most basic, structure of the medium to give expression to what we're doing. And I mask off things if I want a particular colour area to make sure I get the colour completely flat. I can do several coats on it, get it flat like that. And then, I use different densities of paint for the different drawing values that go in there. Yes, sir?
Terribly loaded with questions. I'm trying to figure out which one to ask.
Oh,
So,
ask them all.
so when you describe your clarity of seeing these images and then creating them, does this clarity wax and wane throughout the day or throughout your physical health?
Beautiful point.
How does that work?
Beautiful point. After a while, you build up a kind of an automation. You get a certain level of expertise, in what you're doing, so that you can draw on that at any time. But it's true when I'm working, because I realised. So this is very. As questions come up, so I'm just going to dip into this area. Because this all is nothing but consciousness, I began to realise that, this is not different from me. This is also consciousness. So this paint and this canvas, they're structures of consciousness. And because both in modern science says at every point in creation is the totality of creation. So it's like this hologramic structure of the universe. Every point in creation, every point location in creation has within it the totality of the creation. So like this, in every point value is the total value of consciousness, if we look at it from Vedic science, the total value of consciousness. So that in fact, in our material creation, there's the potential in this table of all sorts of levels of emotional experience and structure. We can, depending on our own state of consciousness, we can, find the table can express all sorts of different emotional values for us if we're going into different states. So I realized that so this changes the whole thing, and that it's the most potent thing that's going on here, and Maharishi gave us the hint for it. He said in this in the arts, he said it's a matter of enlivening the consciousness in matter. So the matter is already consciousness, and deep in matter is that unified totality, pure consciousness, is at the basis of everything. And what the artist does, what we call if we call something a great work of art, and it's hanging there in the museums, what's happened is that as we would understand it, is that artist at that time, whatever it was, that he was painting that painting, he was in this unified state. He's spontaneously in that state, and he put that power of that intelligence into the materials. It actually sticks in the materials, and it's that power in the image that builds the gallery around it, because it starts to have a universal significance, that image, and then it gets a response from the human intelligence. It knows this is valuable and wants to protect it in its culture, because they know its significance will go on generation after generation. And with each new viewer, some new value is unfolded from that expression. So this is the power, this is the potential of art, like that. So I realised that whatever level we're working with, that in the end it's that freshness, that brightness, that bliss of the actual process actually goes into the paint. And it's very important for me to be alert to that when I'm in the process. If I start to feel a bit tired and there's a little element of strain come, then I stop. Because that strain is going to stick into the paint. And that's what the viewer's going to... So we're very alert to that. We only work when we're feeling fresh and the whole thing's flowing very naturally like that. And then if you do that, because that level is the first thing the viewer sees. It won't be an intellectual thing for the viewer. The viewer looks at it and goes, oh, there's that consciousness in the thing, in the object, that's been awakened by the artist, has talked directly to their inner consciousness. There's some universal power that the artist, whether it's music or whether it's dance or poetry, or painting, it doesn't matter. When the artist hits that level, Picasso said a beautiful thing. He said, if you put that thing into the painting, he said, it'll always be there. It'll always be there. It'll never leave that. So this is this immortality level that the arts can go to. And, we've forgotten about that in our recent times because the materialistic thing has gone to such an extreme. And whatever value we get from that, great, we can use that for our future expansion. But it's now going to switch over to this because this unified field, you can't do anything with it. It's a total knowledge of natural law there, but from the point of view of modern science, they've got no technology for how to access that and say, let's use this, the laws of all the laws of nature. But then Vedic science says this is the practical technology. And this is the most important thing in education. This is the most important thing, to give the children that experience, because what they found from the modern scientific research, EEG and everything, is that this experience of transcending is the only experience that wakes up the whole brain all at once. The whole brain is seen to be operating in an integrated way together. Every part of the brain is communicating with every other part. This transcending experience is the only experience that does that. And Vedic education puts this experience of meditation, it's the root of education. And of course then you have all your whatever your studies are in your particular field, and that needs to be done. You need to have practical skills to be able to operate in the world. That's equally important, but we've forgotten all about this side, in the last thousands of years. But now it's time for that to come back, and it's starting to come back. It's going into schools everywhere because, guess what? It works, and the kids feel creative, they feel engaged. The teachers start enjoying teaching again because the kids are actually awake and can understand what they're talking about. So it's happening. It's happening. Susanna.
Could you talk some about the geometries, etc.?
Okay.
That emerged. The mandala form is traditional, and it sounds like you didn't deliberately paint with these circles and squares. And there are all kinds of sutras and marma points and physiologies and geometries, very complex geometries to your paintings.
It's a very timely question. So, in my talk tonight, I can only sort of touch on little things and hopefully gives you some kind of flavour of this area of the discussion in Vedic science and the visual arts. But there is a whole new level that Vedic science can bring forth about all the different disciplines, arts and sciences as well, both. So why don't I pull out this chart then, because this will help us talk about this. So as I said, I'm not doing any philosophical thing when I'm painting. I'm just seeing the thing and painting it. But once I got into these images, I knew they had something to do with consciousness. So when I finished the painting, then, you know, most artists, they create that image and they, you know that patch of red has to be there in that particular place and it has to be that particular colour and that particular shape. And having done that, you know, they feel they've done their job. They don't need to know why it has to be like that. You know, they go on to the next painting. But for me, because I knew these had something to do with consciousness and I wanted to know what that was, then I was naturally drawn into kind of starting to intellectually analyse the structure of the paintings to see what was going on there. The other thing that inspired me to do this was that I was a bit nervous about showing my paintings when this series first came up. So it was about a year before I started showing them to my friends, very, very reluctantly at first, because I thought, well, I know these images are extremely powerful, and for me, and that's a good power. I can feel it's a positive, life-supporting power for me, but they're very powerful, but what kind of effect are they going to have on other people? So anyway, then I invited some friends around, and then they were starting to tell me these very amazing experiences they were having from these paintings. You know, their mind, their body would expand to the size of the universe, you know, all these different transcending experiences. And I was thinking, oh, this is very good. This is right. So this indicates that my paintings are mostly life-supporting in their influence. That was one thing. And the other thing was, now the trouble with this is I don't seem to be able to take any credit for this, because when I'm making the painting, I'm not trying to make it have any particular effect on the viewer. I'm just painting what I'm seeing. So if I'm not putting something into the painting, then what is it about these paintings that are having such a profound effect on people's consciousness? Does that kind of make sense? Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, what? So then I started to look, and I realized that all the paintings actually are structured, all of them are structured from these 5 basic forms, which is the point, the line, the circle, the triangle, and the square. What I've done here is laid out for myself, and now I'm sharing it with you, the whole range of what I call our visual aesthetic reality. Visual aesthetic reality means we're talking about a power of seeing that's way above, you know, the use of the eyes to, you know, navigate ourselves through the environment. It's a value of seeing that can be profoundly affect a whole of our nervous system and mind-body coordination and everything. There's powers of visual expression that can affect, you know, powers of beauty in the world that can really, you know, have a huge impact on us. So that's the field we're talking about in the field of fine art painting, or that's what we mean by our visual aesthetic reality. So anyway, then I thought, okay, now what are these forms? How do they relate to the structure of consciousness? So that was my next question, and you see the 3 charts on the end there. I've worked on this for many, many years, you know, refining it and analysing these basic forms in more and more detail. And then there I've laid out a whole summary of the information that's come up for me about these forms from applying the knowledge of Vedic science. So it's a very simple thing I'm doing here. All credit really goes to Vedic science with this new knowledge, because it's that reveals these hidden dynamics. For me, have revealed these hidden dynamics in our visual world. Yes, sir?
Can you explain, touch on that, the connection that you've made with these textbooks that are thousands of years old to your... Yeah, very good question. Yeah, in my discussion in my books, I make a very clear distinction between these traditional structures of the mandalas and yantras, which come from the Vedic tradition, and, you know, the Mayan tradition. You know, all these traditions had this knowledge of these very basic forms, geometric forms,
And in every case, they're related, very much more specifically in Vedic science, because it's a much more precisely delineated and fully expressed value of this area of study, is that these geometric forms are actually structures of consciousness. Because we said all is nothing but consciousness. So there's, these are structures of consciousness. So my conclusion was, we can go into it in more detail, but the grand conclusion is, that I came to, is that these basic forms, these most basic ones, so let's do this reductionist thing of modern science that we've seen here in one particular discipline. Let's do it here for the visual arts. So we start with our outer cosmos. This is the ever-expanding universe that we're sitting in the middle of. And then all those, this is an infinity of all possible three-dimensional forms expressed, the fullness of all possible forms expressed in the universe. Now what's at the basis of those? These, if we simplify, if we go to the essence of those forms, it becomes something like the cube and the tetrahedron and the sphere. And these are the simplest structures. So then you go from 3, if you're going to reduce again to something even more simple, you go from 3-dimensional forms to 2-dimensional forms. And here we are, we're in my arena of painting now, which is just on a 2-dimensional surface. And we can create on that surface an infinity of forms. There's no limit to the forms that can be created on that surface. In actual fact, I found that my study became one where I was no longer interested in knowing what the guys had painted on that surface, historically, and all the magnificent things they created. What was more fascinating for me is to understand, what this structure was of this actual arena. The pure, white, flat, square picture plane. There's some hidden dynamics in there that we want to pull out because there's something magical about this surface that can allow every possible kind of expression, every possible nuance of human thought and feeling can be expressed in this medium. You just need to turn the pages of a history of art book and see the infinity of all different possible types of images. And you realize there's no limit. So here's a parallel, here's my medium here of painting, and my little square image here, it suddenly becomes the whole universe. Because the universe itself is an expression of all possibilities. And here I can do the same thing. I've got a localized value of this. And then the thought came, if we can capture the total dynamics of natural law in this arena, then we can give the direct experience of the totality to the individual. Because otherwise that totality is so enormous, our senses perception, we just can't grasp it, it's too enormous. But the arts, I came to realize that the highest levels of the arts, whichever discipline of the arts it is, the highest level is that they can capture that totality and give the experience of it, in a localized value of space and time. If you've got Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and you go through the whole experience of that, you can hear from the applause that thunders after the thing's finished that something's happened to those people. And it's that wholeness that's been created by the consciousness that's been put into that medium expression. So like that. So then the conclusion came that, I'll continue with the progression. So this infinity of all possible forms, we collapse back to the simplest one, which is the four lines of the square, and then the 3 lines of the triangle, and then there's another form, which is on one of my other charts, which is this petal shape form, 2-line form, which is when you cross 2 circles over each other, and you get this petal shape in the middle, called the Vesica Pisces. So that's a 2-line form, and then you come back to the single line form of the circle. So this more articulated or more actualized level of form that you get with a closed form, the next simple level is that they're all built of the straight line. So they all collapse back to the straight line, and then the straight line, what's the origin of the straight line? The point is the origin of the straight line. And here we have the point of matter, and with Vedic science then we can go a step further, and we can go from the point of of matter to the point of consciousness. And then we're in that transcendental field. So in the transcendental field we have this, these are all the dynamics of natural law going on in that transcendental field from point to infinity. And then behind that is this absolute pure abstraction. This is called Sadguna Brahm in Vedic science, and this is called Nirguna Brahm in Vedic science. So this is the absolute. This is Brahman without attributes, and this is Brahm with attributes. This is all in the transcendental field. And then the natural expansion of consciousness, it's natural for consciousness to expand. Everything is expanding, the whole universe is expanding. Our consciousness is always growing and expanding. So then that expands into the point of matter. And then in terms of our visual world, this is specifically in terms of our visual world, I'm talking, all the dynamics I'm talking here. You know, mathematics will have a different point of view of these forms, and analytical geometry will have a different point of view. But this world of our visual world has its own laws that govern it. And now we were trying to pin those laws down and define them very precisely so that we can have a grasp of the whole discipline. And then the organizing power that comes out of that will mean, a huge expansion of what can be expressed in this medium. It'll start to really unfold its full cosmic potential. Is the kind of thesis we're putting out. Yes, sir.
Or if you could walk us through the process and your steps of manifesting a specific idea.
Okay. Did that help? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's other layers here. We've got here. We're talking about these forms in terms of Rishidevata and Chandas and all that, and how they relate to modern science and the spin types. So we've done, a lot of analysis of those in detail. This is all in my book, yeah. Finally got it down. So, well, in actual fact, I could ask you to walk us through, because your experience will be just as valid as mine. I'm not asking you to do that, but I'm just saying, making that point, that what can I say? I can say something about this painting, because I'm so glad that I finally painted it. It had been in my mind for about 6 years, and it wouldn't come out. It was saying, I'm sitting here, but you're not ready for me yet. You have to go on working. So anyway, about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, it came out and I put it straight into my sketchbook. And then after a while, I found the time to paint it. Because I've been very busy in these last few years doing a lot of writing. So the paintings, I'm doing 1 or 2 paintings a year just to keep that side lively. But I've been focusing very much on the knowledge and discussion, which I feel is something, it's very, very important to me. And then we're about to find out whether it's important to anybody else when we publish the book. But so anyway, then I made the notations, and of course when I came to paint it, then I knew these structures here that tie the image down in its 4 directions and hold it together. And then there's an echo of them on a smaller scale, or further away from us, however, sometimes we view it one way, sometimes we view it another. So there's those dynamics in the visual image. You've got 2 basic organizations of space. One is like optical, and the other is like illusory. Like when we're talking about realistic painting or figurative painting, they use this shading, light and shade, to give the illusion of a volumetric form in a full dimensional space. This is traditional painting. And so that's all an illusion, because it's just all sitting on a flat surface. So this is the illusionistic side. But also into colour, but colour itself has a dynamic of its own. And if we have a white I should set up so we can demonstrate it. If we have a white canvas and we put a warm red square on it, and then a pale blue square or light blue square of the same size next to it, the red, optically, the red will seem to be as if it's coming out from the surface, and the blue will look as if it's sinking in. So, like that, there's these different dynamics of visual experience. Now, to say a little bit about the way the eye sees, in terms of the retina, the information it gets is just a flat mass of interlocking colour form. Just a flat thing, it's the arena of painting, it's all just flat. The information that actually hits the retina, then it travels to the back of the brain, and then from our processes of growth in the world, as we're growing as children, and the growth of the brain and the interconnections that are taking place in the brain, then the brain starts to structure a way of interpreting that mass of interlocking colour form in terms of a three-dimensional space. So this is an operation of the brain that creates the three-dimensional space. The actual information is just completely flat. So like that, this is the way the eye operates. So this colour, but built into that is these different values of colour, and there's different emotional values of colour. Sort of red is to do with danger, or blue is to do with cool things, or they do vary from culture to culture, but whatever the values are that come up in a culture, they're pretty much universally experienced in that culture, and that's probably appropriate for that particular geographic location in the world, that they interpret colour values like that. Another thing I'd like to say about colour and form is that because we were trying to organise a hierarchy of organising power in the discipline, then I finished up with the whole thing just being colour form. So then I had to say, well, which takes precedence? Which has had a greater power of organising? Is it form or colour? So which would come first? And then the conclusion is that it's form, because it's form or geometry that organises the shape of a colour, and it organises the size of the colour, and it organises where it's placed on the picture plane. So it's geometry that organises colour, actually, because the colour red, it just sits there being red. It doesn't actually do anything, it's just being red, but it's geometry that then gives it a specific value in relation to, in the field of painting, in relation to how we respond to it through our sensory perception, and then that information impacting our emotional and all our different levels of intelligence in us. So that was a great thing. The other great thing I found out, I suddenly realised, is that painting has to be completely intuitive, because this applies to all the arts, because the laws that govern the relationships between colour are completely different from the laws that govern the relationships between form, and the artist has to integrate those two different structures together. In other words, you can't ever make a mathematical formula about if you've got so much red, then it has to be, like that. It doesn't work like that. Each painting has its own specific structure and relationship of dynamics of colour form in it. And, it's the artist working with that thing in that situation, that moment in time, in the evolution of his culture or whatever it is, that orders that thing and makes it come out like that. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you were talking about you sort of see an image, and then through the wholeness, you then project it outward.
That's right.
How can you know that it's intuition, and how can you know that you're, say, clear, confident, and comfortable that that's the intuition versus sort of an intellectualization at a superficial level? How do you know that you're at a deeper level of intuition and you're freeze framing that, which you would have to do to turn it into something? You'd have to freeze frame the intuition somehow. How is that wholeness held? So, for example, we know if we're using logic, what freeze frames that? Facts. But what freeze frames your intuition? How do you know you're clear, confident, and comfortable in that intuition versus a random intellectualization, which we all have. That's one question. Second question is, leading from 1 to 2, what advice would you give us, those of us that are not artists, that we do other things, you know, in our careers, to, you said that you practice this, as you practice turning the wholeness into something concrete, from deep down into something concrete. What can we learn from this in other disciplines? How can we learn to practice that so we're projecting more from a more primal level and not projecting from a superficial level, which would have less impact in our lives and other people's lives? How can we practice that translation from wholeness to concrete? No, so those are the two questions.
Lovely questions, aren't they? It's right at pressing right on the nerve center of the whole thing. So in terms of my experience, I get confirmation from the wholeness itself. When I'm doing the line, no, it needs to be a little bit thinner. Oh yes, now that's right. So it's a very innocent, subtle, faintest little impulses. I mean, there's not a voice back there, you know, saying no, you know. But it's because you work with the medium, and the medium. Now we're getting in. Now you've thrown me into saying some stuff here. Is that because the you know, everything is intelligence, everything is consciousness, and there's hierarchies of organizing power of consciousness in the universe. This is, you know, modern science has displayed that for us in terms of its angle, objective value, but also in terms of the structures of consciousness, because in the end, it's those abstract values in this field they're actually, you know, organizing what these things should be and how they work on their level and how they interact with both sides. This is the intelligence of nature operating. This is the infinite intelligence of nature operating there. So that's nice and silent, isn't it? I like that silence. What was your question again?
I think you answered the first one. So the answer to the first question, I think if I understood it, was innocently and naturally, in rendering it, the width, the line, it just happens.
That's how it works for me.
You're clear, confident, and comfortable in an innocent, natural way. It just sort of happens. Something says something to you.
But remember, we've set up a set of conditions that have evolved, you know, to different levels of understanding about the dynamics of that. And this is thank you, this is the point I wanted to get onto. That we have all these different disciplines, you know, mathematics and biology and physics and chemistry, you know, all these different angles of knowledge, which they're all taking from their own angle a measure of the great big wholeness, because there's a great big thing going on here, and there's all these different levels and different things going on. And if you take a particular viewpoint, we have to take a particular viewpoint on it, otherwise all we get is this infinite wholeness all the time. So we can never find out. So this is the beauty of this intellectual approach, because it allows you to take the thing to bits. And then when you take a car to bits, then, you know, and then you put it all back together again, then you really know that this Mercedes is a fantastic piece of machinery, and I know exactly how it works and exactly what to do with it, and I know how I can get to A to B in it, and you know what it'll do, and when it, you know, all the things about it. So that knowledge has organizing power, is the principle we get, and that's a principle of measurement theory. And Maharishi was talking about that a lot, because he said, you know, modern science gives us this linear, localized values of knowledge, which gives us some kind of control in a certain area. But he said the thing is that you can apply those things, but because it's limited, you get some benefit from it, but because it's not holistic in its vision, you start getting having some negative influence on some other area, which you then have to suffer the consequences of it. You violate some laws in some other area. So this is why Maharishi said the only way to really organize a culture smoothly, the Vedic science, is using this holistic knowledge. Because if you bring this holistic knowledge into all these specific channels of knowledge, you can expand them so they connect to their source in that field. And then when that discipline is built out of that field, then its organizing power will always be in harmony with all the laws of nature. Does it kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that. Now, in terms of your question, as I say, that we're all working in our different areas, whatever level it is, whether we're in gymnastics or whatever it is. So there's a power of intelligence, of natural law, a power of consciousness that presides over that area, because those different areas are connected to some aspect of our physiology or some one or other of our sense perceptions. So these sense perceptions, now that we know that the individual is cosmic, that there's nothing arbitrary about our sense perceptions. If we want to be dramatic, we can say, if man is made in the image of God or the individual is cosmic, that means the way we see is the way God sees. The way we hear is the way God hears, because it's been created by that almighty intelligence. And in fact, we are the instruments through... Thank you, it rang the bell. We are the instruments through which that almighty intelligence appreciates all its little point values of all its different little nuances of possibilities in its infinite possibilities. So there's nothing, this is what's lovely. So we know that there's nothing arbitrary about our sense of sight or our sense of hearing, that it goes to that cosmic level. Then this completely elevates the arts, changes the significance of the visual arts, changes the significance of music. These vibrational values of sound, they're in the end, the audible value of it that we hear has its root in these abstract harmonies in consciousness, which is in our own consciousness. This is why we respond to the Beethoven Ninth Symphony, because all those resonances are already inside us, and Beethoven's just tickling those until they get organized into a pattern that gives us the experience of the big wholeness. And the same with colour form. Colour form also has its own resonances, and those are resonances of consciousness. So this is what I found here. When I look back at this, I said, well, what was going on here? In this particular thing, what was going on here? And I realized that just using this grid of squares, I realized that this square form is probably emotionally the most neutral form. There's not much charge, emotional charge to a square. It's the simplest, most fundamental form. And there's a whole discussion about the square and why the images are square, and it's fantastic. I love it. But we're not getting there until Sunday afternoon, okay? So, this is just this grid of squares. So then I realized, hey, what's going on? Why was I so fascinated? Look at how silly and simple these little paintings are. But I'd never had so much excitement and fun with painting as when I was painting these little things. And I realized afterwards that what it was focusing me on is the way colour talks, the way colours talk to each other. There's a dialogue, because everything is consciousness, as Maharishi says, everything's talking to everything else. And even, in modern science, agriculture now, or horticulture, they know out in your garden, there's a whole soap opera going on out there. Everything, all the plants are talking to each other and sending information to each other 24/7. They've found that if one tree of this species gets a particular disease or something, you suddenly find the other trees are creating the chemistry necessary to protect them from that influence. So there's this exchange going, everything's talking to everything else. It's all consciousness. These colours are all consciousness. And we're finding out how they like to talk to each other here. So looking back in retrospect, I realized that this is probably what was going on. So this process itself was like an education for me about color and preparing me for that level of control I needed over color, to be able to handle these images and be able to see them and organize them like that. So this is the way I explain it to myself. What can we say? It might be like that, or it might not be like that. But that's how That's the way I experienced it.
Lawrence, what about his second question about applying this drawing on the wholeness to like business?
Yeah, the second question was, you said that you practiced over and over, and you developed almost sort of the muscle of doing that got stronger.
Good.
That analogy.
Good
So
description.
my question was, what about the rest of us? How can we practice taking it
Hold on.
to that level
It's a
of
great-
concreteness?
Great question. Now, this helps me be able to say that you're all already doing that. The thing is that as I was trying to get around to say, now perhaps I can say it now, is that all of these different channels of knowledge, because our human logic and intellectual functionings are not separate. They're actually natural law. They're actually the way the almighty intelligence works, but we're operating in a localized, to whatever degree we are localized or expanded, we're working in a more localized level. But it's exactly, it's the same as that almighty intelligence, it's just the scale is smaller. So we have that potential. Now, what happens is that all those powers, organizing powers that we're talking about, that are, organizing all these different hierarchical things of the universe and its ever expansion, all that, they're all sitting there in our consciousness. All those things are there. Whatever Vedic science is, whatever is out there is in here. The individual is cosmic. That's what it means. We are the total universe in a localized form. We have all the potential and all the possibilities of the fully expanded universe is available to us. How do we wake it up? By waking up our consciousness, and then getting intellectual knowledge about the structure of consciousness also helps. So this value of intellectual understanding and then the direct experience of that wholeness, this is an integration. Well, it's very simple. Vedic science has said it's a way of integrating life. Integrating life into the wholeness of this big abstraction that underlies it, and the wholeness of this great big concrete expression that's available to us, to enjoy. Yes, don't forget your question. Let me just finish here. Okay. Now, the thing is, I said that I was focused in that area. So when you focus in a particular area of activity, then there's an intelligence that presides over that, right? And that intelligence is already structured in your brain physiology. And when that intelligence sees you devoting yourself to that area, it says, oh, this guy's serious about this. And then it's like you innocently start to make friends with that intelligence. And then because you're making friends, and the intelligence then starts to support you and help you, and it starts to give information about how its area works. So a businessman is successful when he focuses on business. He's thinking night and day, how to do this, how to do that. This is all, and then the deity that presides over business is getting woken up more and more in your brain physiology. And this is what we mean by being successful. Somebody's successful. It's because they focused in an area or several areas, depending on their capacity, and they've captured that level of intelligence in their thing. And it's a very innocent, simple, we're doing it all the time, whether we know that that's going on. Anyway, it's a natural part of the expansion of human life for that to go on. Did that help?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is, as you focused and you had these cognitions which led to the evolution, as you went to the next layer, which the blue triangle was sort of the gateway to that, you drew on the intelligence that sort of presides over that, and then you practiced more and more. More intelligence came out as you developed more, and then it started accelerating, getting more complicated, but it's because you had one line of thought in that direction that it began to expand and expand more specifically into that. Yeah. What you're saying, so the general question is, we can all do that. The clearer we are on where we're trying to go, that wakes up that deity. That causes us to have an expansion into something now more specific, but we have to devote ourselves to that and not get scattered in other things.
And if you have Vedic science going on alongside it,
yes,
you're expanding your consciousness. It's not only more specific, but at the same time it gets more universal. And universal means that those specific impulses are in harmony with everything else.
Yes.
That means you start to progress in a way that supports your individual evolution,
Yes.
but without damaging anybody else's
Yes.
evolution. This is what we mean by holistic knowledge. And this is Vedic science, this holistic knowledge. It hasn't been there in our cultures for some thousands of years in its fullness. It just so happens that, Maharishi in his tradition says this is a time, there's different time values in the world. Don't we look back in the past and people were living like this, and then before that they were living. So the different time values come up in the evolution of the universe and the world. And they said this is a time when this knowledge can go out to the whole world. And because we've got this instant mass communication system, then that's like that infinite correlation coming up on the physical level, it's like you can see it's the consciousness finding a way to expand itself globally. Is a way to look at it. Now regarding this, you see, although this is more and more specific, for me it was more and more universal.
No, I think I know what
I felt
used the wrong word specific.
No, it was great. No, it was great because it is specific.
Yeah.
Because the specific, the localized and the universal, we're marrying the two.
Right.
And then we come to the level where we realize they're the same thing. And this is unity consciousness. Your localized consciousness, you awaken to the reality that you are the totality. This is it. I am Brahm. This is these higher levels of consciousness that Vedic science describes to us. There's 7 states of consciousness. We've got the waking, dreaming and deep sleep, which we're all going round and round in. But then there's this transcendental consciousness. This is this transcendental level. And then there's this cosmic consciousness and, like that, and up to unity consciousness. So like that, we haven't been educated. The only thing is education. Maharishi said, we just need to educate people to wake up to what it is they are. They've forgotten what they are. Oh yes, and then we wait for it. Yes.
As these structures of consciousness are expressed through your hands, you deliver them onto the canvas. Does it ever happen that you don't have a vision first, or do you always have the vision and the wholeness complete, or does it develop and evolve?
I don't know how you do it the other way, because you've got nothing to respond to. So for me, the wholeness comes first. I know a lot of artists, especially in our modern world, they start with a blank canvas and they just start throwing stuff around, and then something starts to create for them. But I think that's more like a spectator rather than being, it's like a spectator of the art rather than being. I think that this other way is a more traditional way where you culture that inner vision, and then you learn to project or learn to give concrete form to that inner experience, because that process actually enlivens all the different levels and makes the consciousness much more complete. It's the way I understand it. This is the way Vedic science describes it. So this is the way it happens to work for me. And as I say, I had to go through that process before I hit that level. And, then these paintings are the result.
So like that golden yellow, you would have the entire vision would come to you with every little dot and everything all at once. And then...
Yeah. And there it is. This is what was on the inside. And as I say, when that wholeness comes and I make those notations in the book, it is a wholeness, and it reverberates with this value of bliss, and it's energizing, and it says to me, I want you to actualize me. Now, as we heard, like from the dome, people are having these inner experiences of these sorts of structures, but they may not be artists. It's enough for them that they enjoy that thing in their own consciousness, and they don't need to do anything with it. The artist is lumbered with the thing that, he wants to... The reason I paint these paintings is because I want to see what that inner sensation looks like when it's in a concrete visual form. I want to see that. And then, of course, the fun is that then you can share it with your friends, and then they can start to tell you about what this thing is actually, and we can discuss it and have a talk like this where we're discussing the ideas. Does that help?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Rashi.
With respect to the structure, as you said, the square,
Circle and triangle and point and
well,
line.
particularly the square you said.
Oh yeah.
So these are all squares and they have perfect symmetry,
Yeah.
which means that there are basically 4 quadrants.
Right.
So if I know one quadrant, and 4 identical symmetric quadrants, so if I know one quadrant, I know what the other 3 are going to be.
Right.
Right? Yeah. So I guess getting back is when you see the whole, is it the whole or is it just one quadrant? and we know that there are going to be 3 other quadrants that are like that.
But it isn't the case on this one.
Yes, it is, I think.
Well, just look at some of those colors. It's not, they don't mirror the quadrants. It's a great point. I was wondering that.
It's a great point. But seeing as we've heard that the whole is in every part,
Yes.
then it's always the whole initial thing. But I do see the whole thing, and this is what I call, I describe this symmetry as a fourfold symmetry, and that means, very simple, it's a fancy term for saying, that if we take a horizontal line through the painting, then the bottom half is mirrored exactly on the top. And if we take a vertical line down the center, then the right-hand side is mirrored on the left. And if we take a diagonal here, then this bottom half is mirrored on the top half, and the same this side. This bottom half is mirrored on that top. So this is what I call a fourfold symmetry. The significance of that is too much for me to start on now, much as I'd love to. But here we are. So what I did is to take the discussion a little bit further and touching on this. Yes?
Well, I was just going to say, he's absolutely correct that shape, the quarter disc, is then repeated then 3 more times. However, with the circle, the disc, the whole disc, you get that continuity, and it's like a rhythm, and you also have this aspect of wholeness, which a piece of pie doesn't have. It's almost like a song with one, you can have many notes in it, or you can have one note, but the many notes is a little more charming, and especially if you have that wholeness.
There's no question the whole is a whole. You need all 4 for the whole.
Yeah.
But it just so happens also that if I told you just what 1 quarter is, you could reconstruct the whole.
Exactly.
And that's what I was just asking, which...
But if you just have a square, with just the 1 quadrant, after a week you'll be walking around. So this is the effect on our psychophysiology. This is the power of this wholeness. Let me talk about these qualities for a little bit, because in my discussion in my book, now there's 40 aspects in Maharishi Vedic Science, and in recent times that knowledge, this is why it's ineffective. First of all, they lost this inner experience of consciousness. That got lost from the tradition, and which Maharishi has now revived. And the other thing was that these different aspects of the Veda were being taken care of by separate families in India. And they felt that they had the wholeness of Vedic science, and then there's other guys doing some other area like that. But then Maharishi comes along and says, no, all these 40 aspects, they give a description of the whole structure of natural law, from the most abstract level to the most concrete expressed level. This is just a description of all the laws of nature that structure the whole of creation, and it also describes what our individual localized value, how it relates to that big wholeness, as I've mentioned before. So this is Vedic science. So there's 40 aspects. So to analyze the structure of my paintings in terms of all these different 40 aspects of Vedic science, I thought this is going to be, to put it in a book, it's too exhaustive, So I thought, well, let's just take 8, say, of the basic qualities of consciousness, or the basic qualities of the absolute or the unified field that Maharishi most often referred to when he was talking about that level. And here we say it's unmanifest, it's unbounded, all the expressed values, all the manifest values in creation, they're all bound, they're all localized individual things, they have a boundary. But this field is completely unbounded, it's infinite, unbounded. It's a complete fullness. Every possible complementary and opposing value is held in terms of pure potential in that abstract field. And it's from there that potential gets expressed into specific concrete forms. That's what the universe is. So it's a perfect symmetry because it's this perfect balance. It's forever like that. It's an eternal reality. It always was, it is now, it always will be. So that's it's a total autonomy. It's completely self-sufficient. It doesn't depend on anything else for its existence. It's pure existence itself, like that. So it's an eternal continuum. It goes on forever. It's both this infinitely silent value and infinitely dynamic value together. Now, infinitely silent means there's absolutely zero everything. There's nothing, absolute pure nothing, infinite pure abstraction, infinite abstraction, that's the infinite silence, but at the same time there's this dynamic value, which we said all the laws of nature are in their abstract structure. Why do we say the laws of nature are abstract? It's because I like to give this simple example. Everything we see, everything around us growing. You plant an apple seed and then an apple tree grows. And you say, well, why does an apple tree grow? What's making it grow? And then the natural answer comes, it's the laws of nature. And we say, okay, fine, we're happy with that, it's the laws of nature. But nobody has ever seen a law of nature. We only ever see the manifestation of its abstract functioning. We only see the concrete expression of its abstract functioning. So all the laws of nature are abstract. And then this concrete universe gives us an indication that this stuff must come from somewhere, because we know we're not making the tree grow. So there's some intelligence in the universe that's making that happen. And then this is modern scientific investigation, and then through consciousness, the ancient Vedic rishis, they found that, they discovered those laws of nature in their own consciousness. So this is what the value of the Veda is. So anyway, I just took 8 of these basic things, and then in my discussion, in the more expanded level in my discussion, I go into details of how these different qualities are operating in the paintings. Should I do one of them now?
Yes.
And then getting late. That's a shame. We're just starting. So this is, we just described this fourfold symmetry. So maybe we'll do this infinite dynamism along with infinite silence, being a unified value in that unified field, because it's a unified field, and so we know that there's these two values there, infinite silence and infinite dynamism, and they're kind of coexisting as one thing there. So how do I find this in the paintings? Where do I find this infinite silence and infinite dynamism operating in the paintings?